Alex here with a perspectives video on transparency versus privacy, specifically with regards to cases involving children and families and in the context of providing the public electronic coverage. Let's go straight into it. We are here with Ida Sedlock, and why don't you let us know a little bit about what you do and your work for the legal community?
Okay, well, I have been a paralegal for almost 15 years in the community. I've worked in different areas of law as a paralegal. And in addition to that, I also volunteer for Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada as a volunteer educational advocate for children who need help um, with their education and things of that sort.
So that's actually what we're about to go into. It's a little bit of a controversial topic, but before we do, could you explain to the viewers what domestic relations matters are?
Okay, domestic relation matters are basically any issue that is in the family courts with regards to contested divorce, a joint divorce, or custody matters. Um, those are domestic relations, and they're in front of a family court division.
Okay. Now, one of the things that the public often talks about when it comes to court is the family courts. And before we go into our topic, I have another one of these sort of lead up questions, but it might surprise people to know that not all jurisdictions have a family division. And would you like to go a little bit into that as far as the family division in Nevada?
So, well, particularly in our district in Clark County, Southern Nevada, the 8th Judicial District Court, it's comprised of 52 judges, both civil criminal division and family court division. Family court, I believe, has over 30 judges currently, and based on Nevada legislature, there will be 6 added benches by the end of the year.
It seems like
So,
you're kind of implying that it depends on how large the district is, because you mentioned the number of judges and the fact that we were increasing the number of seats. So is that basically how it works in Nevada? Do only counties with a certain population or a certain number of districts have a family division?
I believe so. For example, Nevada has Nye County, Elko, Northern Nevada counties, and um, I don't really hear anything about a second division family court. I, I'm not really apprised of how Northern Nevada works, but basically in Southern Nevada, all of Clark County, our jurisdiction basically has increased judges based on the amounts of cases filed per the population.
Okay, so that's kind of what I was getting at. Now, going into our topic, I've actually titled this perspectives video Transparency versus Privacy. And in my opinion, this is probably the most controversial perspectives topic that I'm going to go into. And before I even go into it, I just want our viewers to know, I don't know about you, but when it comes to me, I'm not even 100% in favor of providing transparency of domestic relations matters in Nevada, specifically child custody matters. But I do sort of edge over that threshold, that 50% threshold, in favor of covering domestic relations matters. And I was sort of interested in your perspective on this topic because it seemed to me like the insiders are adamantly against any electronic coverage of divorce and child custody matters. And I didn't know that there were really any attorneys or judges at all that would be sort of in favor of coverage. And you brought up a lot of points when it came to your posts on social media, and I was hoping that you could share those with the public now.
Okay, well, my perspective comes twofold in that in my legal experience in the legal community, I've had 4 years as a calendar clerk in the 8th Judicial District Court. So I've been inside the courts and know the court system. Also, my other um, twofold is that I have been in family division personally. So my perspective comes from both avenues, both as being in the court and both being a family court litigant. So um, when I am just like you about your 50% threshold and erring on the other side, in that I obviously respect, domestic matters, families, children, whatever goes on in a family that goes before, family court, and those figuring out those domestic relations and the need for privacy and having privacy. But I believe I err on the other side in that there needs to be some kind of transparency, in that there needs to be accountability and transparency when it comes to judges on the bench, because as everyone knows, family court is not a jury court. All cases are decided by a judge. There's no jury. And in the state of Nevada, all the judges currently are not appointed, unless there's retirements. But other than that, we have judicial elections that coincide with regular elections. So for this reason, I believe that there needs to be transparency and accountability, so that people who both have cases with lawyers or even pro se litigants, I once was a pro se litigant, can know what goes on truly in the court and how a judge is, in that how they hold their trial court, how their demeanor is, what their decisions are, how their demeanors are towards lawyers, what kind of lawyers come and go, what kind of litigants there are. There's pro se litigants, how they're treated, and etc. Because until then, it's very information. It's good information to have for the public that a lot of the public is not privy to, or maybe they don't care, but maybe eventually they'll end up in the footsteps of family court unknowingly. So, but as far as privacy, sure, I believe maybe that there needs to be, maybe there's some kind of a very concrete, very detailed, threshold of some sorts where cases can be, because the way the system is now currently, I believe you can basically easily seal your case, basically by verbally asking the court and the judge to seal the case, or by a written motion. I personally I have a sealed case. So, and I, believe it or not, did not want it to be, but here we are. But you can ask for privacy in that matter and have closed hearings, meaning the public cannot come to hearings, and in particular if it's a sealed case. So, but I feel that it's easily sealed now. Basically, by a few statutes, you put it on paper or verbally ask and you seal the case. But I believe in most cases that there should be transparency, again, for the reasons I've said about the judge's demeanor and decisions and the lawyers, particularly because most of the judicial elections in this jurisdiction, they're based a lot about the legal community per se than the public. And the public may have a say if they know the judge or have had a case, but other than that, the people don't really know the judges, and they'll just maybe pick one because of a look or a name, or maybe just don't vote, period. So, which happens probably most often than not. They don't care. They'll elect everybody, and then when it comes to judicial, they'll just not pick nobody. So, but maybe there's some kind of a balance in that. Okay, maybe cases are so severe with children. I think part of the privacy I would want is that maybe the facts that have to do with children, particularly the younger ones than maybe even teenagers, or the capacity of what goes on in the case, and maybe reports that are confidential, confidential reports from providers and things of that. maybe there's some kind of balance of privacy and transparency in those aspects. But for the most part, maybe if there's no children involved, it's a divorce, or maybe the children are a lot older or they're teenagers or something. I mean, maybe there can be some kind of list, just like how there's a list for best interests, straight down, you gotta meet all these letters. Maybe there's some kind of a checklist for the kind of case it is to maybe make it harder to seal. Um,
Right. Because I think if it's one of those things that's just wide open, my opinion is that the judge on the bench would probably see the parent that wants the case to be available to the public as some kind of negative light, or there would be arm twisting and there would be pressure applied. So I think a list of factors is a huge deal, and also even just allowing coverage, but sort of ordering certain protections, like maybe keeping the name of the child. Right? There's certain things that they could do,
sure.
and I thought about these things. One of the things that I like that you brought up is the election factor, because there's so many people out there that claim the public doesn't care about judges and they don't really know anything about them. And it's a little funny to me that the solution that they jump to is, well, let's just take the vote away and appoint all the judges. And it seems like nobody has come up with the idea of why don't we actually provide them more information. I'm not saying it's going to work for sure, because we may provide all this information to the public only for them to not care anyway. But I think at least it should be the option, the first option when it comes to being in a democratic society, and the last option, I think, should be the one that just takes the vote away and switches to a full appointment system. But providing electronic coverage of those cases is one of the ways to provide some information to the public. And then the other thing that kind of bugged me about it is this idea that people don't care in an area where so many people actually do find themselves in court, because I can understand the public not caring maybe about multi-million dollar medical malpractice suits and corporate suits between two corporations and stuff like that. But it's a lot harder for me to imagine in this day and age, with so many people going through the child custody and divorce actions, for them to not care, because it's just one of those things that, I mean, I don't know how things were back in 1864. That's when they created that statute that allows divorce to be private based on the demand of, actually, it was 1865 when they created that statute that allows one party to a divorce to just close the hearings. But now it seems to me that divorce and child custody in general are way more common in society. And even the idea that children will just suffer because everybody knows about their parents that are separating, even that idea seems a little bit far fetched now, with so many kids that are actually going through that. In fact, to be a child going through that probably puts you in the majority. I just don't see. So I mean, I'm totally with you on that. And I mean, um, one of the other things that you mentioned had to do with seeing whether the judges were competent. And that's actually kind of where I first decided to cross the line in favor of providing electronic coverage. Not that we've done that yet, not that I know when we will, but it happened when I saw this interview with Judge Judy. I asked you about it prior, and you haven't seen it, but her approach was actually precisely that, and it was a little scary, because she said that the solution to the problem is to point cameras at the judges and attorneys in these proceedings. And her reasoning is what was a little scary. Her reasoning was that there was pervasive incompetence throughout, at least in the New York. I guess she presided over the Manhattan Family Court bench as a supervising judge. Most people know her as a TV personality, Judge Judy, but she was a family judge on the Manhattan bench, and she stated flat out in front of millions of people that the incompetence was pervasive, and she thought the solution was to shine lights on it all. So for me, that really resonated and kind of pushed me over the edge. And it was good to see your perspective. And it wasn't just you, there were other attorneys who kind of sided with you. For example, Alex Debato. And then, of course, there were attorneys who were opposed. And that's kind of what I assumed would happen. I just assumed that the entire legal community would be adamantly against it. So, I mean, I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to touch on before we kind of sign off here, but go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I have I have 2 points real quick. One is that I think a lot of it for being against it is not only, of course, because of privacy, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact of the kind of system we have here, where that, you know, granted it's a public election, um, just like any other election and vote with the judicial elections, but there's a lot of um, money and how do I say this? There's a lot of connection between lawyers, contributions, and judges here, and I feel a lot of that has an impact on who is on the bench and how they make those decisions. And I think there has to be some kind of mechanism where if there's not appointment, that there's some kind of at least open transparency to see what goes on. And yes, unfortunately, there are some judges even now that I think, you know, I would agree with Judge Judy. I've experienced it, and it's unfortunate. And I think that because of that, more people should be aware and see what goes on, um, because it affects families and people's lives, especially the experience and competency of a judge and how they come to decisions. So, and also, I think um, a lot of the privacy and with the legal backlash of erring on privacy, it's also, I think, because of maybe how lawyers may be afraid of how they come look through, or how they seem about arguing. I think a lot of it has to do on appearance and ego and reputation, possibly, or questioning their work. I think that's also probably a reason for wanting to keep it private. And why should there be cameras in domestic relation courts? So
Yep.
but in the grand scheme of things, I think that there should be transparency. Oh, another last point. I think a lot of people also forget that privacy kind of goes out in the air these days, especially if families post things on social media or talk about their case to friends and family or social media. So I think that kind of defeats any privacy argument in sealing cases in of itself, so that just opens,
Yeah.
well, why should it be sealed if you're going to be airing things or talking about it to begin with? So those are my closing remarks.
Thank you so much for coming on, Ida. I really appreciate it, and I will hopefully see you around.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Alex.